Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for Skeleton Crew episodes 3, 4, 5, and 6. So, didn't get a chance to do weekly reviews for the episodes that have happened since I did my first video, just because Christmas period, stuff like that. But I also think that ties into part of my feelings on the show, is that I also didn't really feel like I needed to rush out and review these episodes one by one, just because of the style of show that it is. I think unlike some of the other Star Wars shows, this isn't the one where I think every single episode is this like mega release with like tons of interesting stuff happening here. This is a smaller scale story that I think is mostly working, but I overall don't think is the most exciting kind of Star Wars thing in the world. It's the typical thing I've talked about in my various other Star Wars kind of show reviews, which is that there's kind of two kind of levels of kind of discussion here. One is obviously just, how is this as a show? What's the production, kind of writing, general quality like just as a show? But then it's a Star Wars show. Where on the Star Wars IP interest scale is this? And I'd say overall this one's relatively low down, but does seem pretty well made for what it is. My overall thoughts, given that I think there's only 2 episodes left of the season, potentially series, is that I do unfortunately have a feeling that there probably isn't enough time to just wrap up this show in 2 episodes and have it just be a one and done season. So it does feel like they're probably going to be doing the thing that a lot of these shows have been doing, which is basically trying to get that season 2 confirmed. Now, maybe they'll surprise us and do a lot, but I do think some of the mysteries, they haven't delved into them enough, that 2 episodes I don't think is enough unless they're very long episodes. So they're probably aiming for a season 2, and I'm not sure that this is necessarily the show that kind of really needs it overall, because, you know, when something like The Acolyte isn't getting a season 2, why is this getting a season 2? That kind of feels a bit weird, and it kind of just feels like the decisions maybe surrounding the show have already been made, and just because the show season 1 is already made, it's out, and I'm just a bit confused about kind of the direction for Star Wars going forward, and I need to see them make some announcements to kind of see if they're back on track or not, because I just don't really get, to a certain degree, what's happening a lot of the times. But like I said, overall I think the show is pretty good quality, but I'm not blown away by it, is probably the main idea. Part of it is still the sense of, why is this a show that they're doing? Like, why isn't this a novel, for instance? Because I think this would probably make for like a really good YA novel, maybe series, but why the decision to do this as its own show? I think part of it is that it was put into production at a time when they were willing to do a lot of interesting things. I think we've kind of got past that to a certain degree, and maybe just the entertainment industry full stop has kind of moved in that direction. I just think like budgets for some of these shows seems to have gotten out of hand, and I'm not sure that they want to do this sort of stuff anymore. But it's, you know, solid for what it is, but at the same time, what is it really doing? What I find the most interesting in this show is the mysteries, the whole At-Atan, why it's sort of isolated from the galaxy, why it's viewed as a legend. Some of the reveals from these episodes about the fact that it's actually one of many planets that is called At something, that seem to be connected in some sort of a way, and all have potentially weird things that have happened to them. What's going on there? They're playing into sort of pirate lore here by addressing, you know, the ship that they have, the old captain, what he did, and that sort of stuff. But I also feel that Jod is the most interesting character in the show, but the main characters are the kids, and there's a weird tonal thing happening there, because the kids and their character arcs are nice, but they feel like a pretty big contrast to some of the other stuff that's kind of happening here and what I actually want to be the focus. So that's why it's maybe not like absolutely doing everything for me. If you like this sort of tone and style of show, it probably is exactly what you want. isn't quite doing it for me. And like I said, I think it's somewhat low in the just overall Star Wars kind of interest for me, though there's some stuff here that is, I think, decent. So let's kind of go through the episodes. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on every episode. Hopefully I'll be able to review the last 2 episodes week by week. Episode 3, I thought the kind of new character they introduced, the kind of kind of owl bird character, I thought she was very fun. But overall, again, it was mainly just an episode about getting coordinates to the next place. Over the course of these episodes, they did seem to basically confirm Jod can use the Force. He is not an active Jedi, of course, he is a pirate, but they have avoided, or they've brought it up, but he's avoided talking about the details of why he has the Force and stuff like that. So he could still be an Order 66 survivor. They might just go down the road of he's a Force user who happens to have developed his skills to a certain degree. So there is, it does feel like there's a whole Jod backstory that we don't have yet, and this kind of addressed some of that, while also kind of being the episode where, you know, the kids finally learn that kind of truth. Like, they didn't keep up the act that he is a Jedi for very long. By the end of that episode, the second he met someone who knew him, the kids were kind of brought into the loop on, like, don't trust him. He goes by many names. He is a pirate, schemer kind of type thing. But by the end of that episode, you know, it was basically just, here are the coordinates to somewhere. We assume it's at Atton, but actually it ends up being at Akron. And this sets up the idea that we're going into the next episode. Again, I'm maybe mixing some of these episodes up a little bit, but there were at least a couple of scenes where we did cut back to at Atton to highlight the parents wanting something to be done to get their kids back, and like, can we send someone out past the barrier, and the droids all being like, no. Them all wanting to organize a meeting with the supervisor, but there being a little bit of a, no, we can't do that right now thing, we'll get to it as soon as we can going on. And that's quite interesting, and I wish the show maybe had a little bit more time to have an active plot, like, on the planet, because I suppose my biggest fear for this show is that it just ends on the cliffhanger of sort of, here's sort of the truth about what's going on at Atton. Wait for season 2 to do anything with it, and it was all a build up to wait for season 2, which is always, I think, a little bit frustrating, rather than the season just existing on its own as a clear-cut kind of story. But we'll see what they do in 2 episodes, because they are moving around quite a bit. The pacing is quite high. They're not stuck in anywhere for kind of too long, so that is quite good. But yeah, the parents kind of having to go behind the scenes with the droids to get stuff to happen. It doesn't seem like there's any human characters sort of scheming against them. It is just them having to go against the droids, which, especially given some of the reveals from kind of later on, that, okay, the planet, the big reveal is that At Atton is home to, I suppose, a still active Old Republic mint, so where they make the money. This explains, I suppose, why they have so much of that money. There's a few things about, like, is the mint still active and the droids are actively keeping it going, or someone in charge is keeping it going to create this utopia society, or do they just have a big stockpile because of the planet where they got it from? And there's mysteries like that I think are still in play about, like, why is At Atton so legendary, so hidden? They explained in episode 3 that, like, there's nebula gases or something like that I suppose keeps it off a lot of the star charts, or just like sensing that it's out there. That is the barrier. So that explains that to a certain degree. They again reference the whole Great Work situation, which again is more of a High Republic thing. And again, there's the confusion about the terminology of, like, are we talking Old Republic as in the era, the Old Republic, or an era of the Republic that happens to be older than the one we are currently in? And that's maybe what hasn't been made super clear, but there's some, I think, nice enough stuff going on. Moving into episode 4, we go to At Akron, of course. I would say with this episode, I liked the reveal of all the At planets at the end. I liked the reveal with the droid that, you know, every time At Aten is mentioned, he has the kind of almost code phrase of "I ain't ever heard no At Aten," and eventually that kind of reveal coming out that he does know about it. The pirates were here. This is where they got the kind of information from to find At Aten, but they're trying to hide their tracks, including making it so that the droid can never tell anyone about like the truth about that. And he ends up turning on them because that was the order from like the last captain, but then managing to sort of get around it. So there's a bunch of these planets called At something or other. They didn't really go into any particular detail about like what the significance of that really is, because there's a general mystery, which is At Aten is like the treasure planet, but then these other At planets are just like, okay, do we, like, are they all hidden? What's the situation there? That's what I wasn't kind of super clear on, which is why I think there is still a relatively big part of this mystery that still needs to be revealed, and why I'm kind of worried about there only being 2 episodes to do it all in. But that was the end of the episode. I think most of episode 4 didn't really do it for me, because given what happened at the end and the reveal that there's all these At planets, okay, this one, there's a war between these 2 kind of factions, there's like child soldier stuff going on that they didn't really get into. I just thought it was really undercooked and underexplored, and it was just like, okay, Neil has this interesting dynamic with the girl, and that was kind of nice. In terms of just the decent characterization that the show has. From a world building perspective, I was just a little bit like, what are we doing on this planet? Like, it was cool because obviously the planet is sort of like basically identical in terms of where all the structures are on the planet, but something very different is happening with the people and the situation on the planet. One is a utopia sort of like controlled by droids where there's no war, and it's overly peaceful perhaps, and then this one is just a pure conflict between 2 sides. Now, I think they undercut any like dark tension that there was to that with just how not important it felt. This is where I think the fact that the main characters were kids really kind of almost like killed the tone of what was going on here, with the guy immediately kind of like, hey, you test yourself, train as warriors, we'll send you out to battle, use all these weapons just randomly over here. And the build up was like the kids are being forced into this battle, but Jod ends up kind of inadvertently diffusing the whole situation because he uses the credits to kind of like, what was it, he buys the Eopes from the other group and gives them back, and that sort of fixes things. But we just leave the planet with no real sense for what's going on. And then because we didn't really continue with that, like I thought there was maybe a trajectory if the show had more seasons or episodes, that we would go to the various different At planets to eventually find clues to get to At Aten. That's not the way they did it, but it also meant that they had this reveal about all these other planets that didn't really amount to all that much. Will we come back to it? I'm not sure. It opens the plot, I guess, for maybe more going on with this show, which is quite interesting. Like, there is some good world building here in that, but I don't think they used it maybe as well as they could have. But anyway, from there we go to episode 5, which is kind of like the spa episode. And again, some of the stuff towards the end when we got into the lore about the pirate captain, kind of Renaud or whatever his name was, that was good. I felt like the rest of the kind of 20 minutes of the episode just at the spa and all that setup was not super fantastic in my mind. Like, the dynamic between the kids and Jod is, I think, nice enough, but I do think tonally they don't exactly know where they want to be, where sometimes it's very kind of kiddie, sometimes it's more serious, and it's just kind of going back and forth. There's some interesting stuff here. They meet the kind of creature that at the end that seems really kind of chaotic, but actually is quite nice to them. We get the whole fun thing of like this is meant to be the pirate hideout built into a mountain called like Death Mountain or whatever, but actually it's been turned into a spa, and it's more like the legend of this place is that apparently it was built by pirates, when our main characters are fully under the assumption that, yeah, it's meant to be a pirate lair, but it's actually a spa. Again, Jod meets someone who knows him. This brings the rest of the crew back down upon him, kind of referencing where we were in episode 3, of course. And it's just this kind of whole chase sequence, and the kids going off in different directions, and eventually we kind of, do what we need to do. Overall, it's fine. But again, this episode, most of it kind of didn't work for me that well, in the same way as episode 4. Some of it didn't work with the whole war on the planet, and the different factions there was just kind of very, very odd to me. Episode 6, I would say similarly, is like, it's good, but it's very short. Like, I think when you factor out all the other stuff, its runtime of just the new content is like 26 minutes, and that's not great at all, I think, for a show like this. And I think this is something that Star Wars shows need to sort out, is what are you trying to do? I get to a certain degree it's streaming, and you just write the time that you need for the episode. That's maybe their approach, but I also feel like just do specific set run times and then adjust that when you absolutely need to is probably the kind of better option, because amount of time is becoming a big problem with, I think, a lot of these shows, with in terms of how much time you have to explore things, that whole type of stuff. The big thing at the end of episode 5, of course, is that in the kind of hideout, of course, Jod takes over the crew. He basically challenges Fern for the title of captain. She's a kid, she can't fight him, so Jod becomes the new captain. They sort of half set up the idea that Wim sees a lightsaber on a pedestal, picks it up, and you think he's sort of maybe going to save the day, but of course, no, they've not been doing that in this show. He ends up picking up the lightsaber at the end. Probably the most direct confirmation that, okay, he can use the Force, because he just Force pulls it to himself, that here was an item that clearly didn't have anything else attached to it. Wim was holding it before, no problem, and then he pulled it into him. Now, in an interesting kind of turn of things, because he obviously betrays everyone at this point, what ends up kind of happening here is that the lightsaber doesn't get used in episode 6. Even though he is then captured for episode 6, he doesn't use the lightsaber, and they kind of, I don't even remember like seeing it anywhere in the episode. But anyway, most of what happens in episode 6 is Jod is captured by the rest of his crew, but he's given his last right of appeal, and he uses it well. It's a really well done scene where he just highlights that, hey, we're pirates. We're always looking for the next sort of mission to kind of pull off, so we can scrounge up whatever money, treasure we can get, but we're always working off scraps. Your current captain is good as a first mate, but as a captain, he's only going to get you so much. I finally have the path to like the ultimate score where we're going to like eat well. We won't be hungry anymore. Follow me and we can do that. Now, it's not that the whole crew turns to his side, but he prevents himself from being killed here immediately. That it's like, hey, we're going to follow this lead, and if it's wrong, we're going to kill you then. So he's in play. I'm guessing he'll be able to turn the tables at some point with the lightsaber and kind of take advantage, but it seems like, okay, we're going to add Aten because it has the Old Republic mint, and everyone wants that and is interested by that. So I think the setup, obviously, is that the finale is probably going to be back on at Aten, but the parents will have discovered something and will arrive at a point at which, you know, the mystery of what's going on at Aten is very open. Like, we're dealing with stuff that we didn't know about before, and it seemed quite normal initially, but now all of a sudden we have millions of questions, and hopefully some of that stuff will actually be resolved. For the rest of the episode, it is the kids split up because of some kind of drama kind of stuff that happens. Mostly it revolves around B kind of feeling that like Fern is just kind of in a world of her own, just acting on her own, making the decision, doing things that she can do, not thinking about if the rest of the crew can actually follow her in doing those same things. And we kind of finally address a little bit with KB, like the whole cybernetic thing. Is that just a device that she wears, or like, is it cybernetics? But no, it's cybernetics. She had an accident. These are what, are requirements for her to kind of still be alive or whatever. And we addressed that, yeah, she's been sort of struggling on these kind of missions, kind of following Fern where she's been going, and it's got corroded, and Fern has not really been thinking too much about the kind of, I suppose, condition of her crew, basically. So she ends up going off with Wim, just following the kind of local kind of animals. And we get these two connecting for the first time. We get the reveal about like, hey, I'm capable, but like this is actually like a problem, and I can't do everything. I do need help sometimes, and Fern maybe doesn't realize that. Wim helps her fix the thing just barely. Their whole plot ends up that they're just led to a monster that doesn't really amount to anything. So Fern is actually sort of correct. We're going off with Neil to get the ship, which is now named the Onyx Cinder, back. And then it just leads to the kind of big reveal of like everyone coming back together. We activate the big button on the ship, revealing that I think there was a line of dialogue from one of the previous episodes where the captain said that he'd armored up the ship. The button detonates basically the armor part of the hull, revealing, I suppose, the core ship underneath the armor, and they're able to break free of the thing that they got trapped in, basically. And now they're sort of free to go where they need to go, and the question now is just going to be, I suppose, everyone converging on the same points, because the kids are still trying to get home, but there's mysteries at play here, and what are they going to do next now that they've kind of got out of this kind of crazy situation is the big thing here. One thing, because I did watch these 4 episodes, rewatched them in a row before this video, is the owl bird character from episode 3 did tell KB to sort of contact her if she needed any help. So I'm assuming they'll come back to that probably next episode or episode 8 as a way to potentially get the kids back up to speed on things, or like just to give the kids a bit of an advantage to bring them back into play in some sort of a way. Because I'm guessing what they'll have to do here is whatever happens on At-Aten will have to make it open to the world again, and what does that exactly mean? There's some interesting questions, but I don't really know what to kind of make of it. So that's my thoughts without going in depth on every single thing that happened. Is just that I think the show is fine. It doesn't excite me a massive amount compared to other shows like The Acolyte, but it is good overall. Again, I think I said this in my first review for the first 2 episodes. It's just like, is this what Star Wars needs right now? I'm not really sure. Does this change anything for Star Wars and the position it's in currently? Not really, because I think we're probably going to be in a situation asking if this is going to get a season 2. And with where Disney is at the moment, I'm kind of like, I don't really know. I haven't looked up statistics to see if this is doing well in views or not. I'm going to guess it's probably not super high in the view count stuff. I know its budget is not as high as The Acolyte was, but, it still probably is a show with a pretty high budget. So what does that mean? And it's frustrating that I think instead of being, as a Star Wars fan, just being able to enjoy the projects as they kind of come out, you as a fan kind of have to overly think about the business parts of things just to have a hope that like the story that you're interested in will continue or not. That is a frustrating thing these days in Star Wars, is just that there's very little consistency with projects because they don't seem to know what they want to do or can do, or planning them out to any sort of degree. Like, is it not kind of crazy that we don't already have like the second season of Ahsoka, like how long that's taking to happen. They haven't made a decision really on like if Obi-Wan is going to get a season 2. A lot of these things I think are a problem for the franchise overall. But they're my thoughts on the kind of, I suppose, middle 4 episodes of Skeleton Crew. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. Was there anything I missed in the video? What are your thoughts on just the middle part of the show overall? But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.